Business editor Owen Fairclough is here with us today. For once, he's not talking about Europe. It's something a little bit different, a growing emergency over the US drought, Owen.
That could well have an impact on Europe, Stuart. It's also interconnected these days. Half of US states have now been declared in a drought emergency. That's not to over-dramatise the situation, but that means officially that millions of farmers, or thousands of farmers, I should say, can qualify for billions of dollars of US government funding help. The speed of this disaster has been cruel. Just weeks ago, US authorities were predicting a bumper harvest this year. Now, in the wake of that drought across much of the United States, the authorities are having to radically revise their targets for this year, and the amount of corn, maize and soybean that's likely to be produced from the United States. It's having a knock-on effect elsewhere, with export countries like Argentina also facing grain shortages. Many analysts are now comparing this situation to the food riots of 2008. Siobhan Silk has more details.
American farmers were expecting a record harvest this year. Now they're just trying to salvage what they can of their parched crop.
It's been getting close to a month since we've had any rain. We're still hopeful. If we get a rain in the next week to 10 days, it'll help somewhat, but the edge of the big yields is gone. That's no way to ever recover that at the present time now.
The Corn Belt of America is burning up.
This is the main area of the United States where all the crops are grown. Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Nebraska. We grow most of the corn and soybeans in the United States, and this is right where the drought is centered this time.
It's the worst since a devastating year-long drought that began in 1988 and resulted in billions of dollars in lost crops.
1988's the big one that we all talk about. 2012 is going to be probably going to surpass any of those and be the biggest historic event that we have in my career anyway. Probably on the verge of 1936, the Dust Bowl era.
With demand outstripping supply, American corn is at its highest price in almost a year. In the past month alone, it's gone up by 40%. But because yields are significantly down, farmers still aren't making money. Consumers will likely see the difference at the supermarket till, but the effect could be worst felt by the world's poor. The US is the world's biggest exporter of maize. A failing harvest there is likely to drive up global commodity prices.
So as we said there, food commodities continuing to drive upwards. How are the markets looking at the start of the week, though?
Pretty flat, has to be said, Stuart. Certainly on the Asian picture, there are the numbers for you. You can see the IBEX leading the pack down by around 0.5% or so. Remember, a lot of investors are going to wait and see what happens in the US. We've got some big earnings out this week. Goldman Sachs, Yahoo, IBM, you name it, they're reporting earnings. The Asian markets, again, a similar picture there, all pretty flat, with the Hang Seng just managing to eke out a few gains, but you can see the Shanghai Composite down by around 1.5%.
So Peugeot shares, they've also edged down once again, nearly 1% at the opening of the day's trade. This is after the events of last week, isn't it?
Yeah, and we had a pretty dramatic reaction to that, of course. Peugeot shares ended Friday nearly 7% down. Over the weekend, the word was unacceptable. That was the word and reaction from President François Hollande, who does not like the look of this plan at all for Peugeot to shed up to 8,000 jobs, though many of those will be on a voluntary basis over the next year or so. Hollande said he wants to discuss this with French trade unions and will be doing just that this week. The government is also drawing up what it sees as an alternative strategy for the French car industry that would include Renault as well, and some kind of plan over the medium term to try and revitalise it. But it remains to be seen, as is the old cliche, as to what the government can actually do here. One of the things it has said it might be able to enforce is for one of the sites for Peugeot, an old factory, one of its older factories outside Paris, to remain involved in French production somehow. But the problem with a company like Peugeot is it's privately owned, unlike Renault, which has a 15% government stake in it. So the government is very influential in what happens with Renault. It isn't the case with Peugeot. They're quite entitled to say to the government, well, we don't really care much for your alternative plan.
OK, well, if the hammer is falling hard on Peugeot's French workers, the story is very different in a key emerging market. Production running at full capacity, in fact, at its Brazilian factory, and there are big expansion plans underway. Well, France 24's Nicholas Ransom reports.
Northwest of Rio de Janeiro lies Porto Real and the factories of PSA Peugeot Citroën. Among its 4,500 employees, there's no sign of a crisis. 6 days a week, production lines here are working at full throttle, a mark of the company's faith in the Brazilian market. In October last year, the French group announced long-term investment worth €940 million. The aim to double production capacity in Brazil by 2015.
At the end of 2011, the production line finished here. Since expansion, everything you see from here to there is new. All this was built in order to increase our production capacity.
To set the pace and make this site a touchstone for the company, Peugeot Citroën has appointed a young mechanical engineer as manager. At the relatively tender age of 35, Ana Isabel Fernandez is in charge of the 3,600 workers manning the assembly lines.
At the moment, we have a production capacity of 150,000 vehicles a year. At the end of the year, we expect to be producing 220,000. That means 40 vehicles an hour. And in 2015, we'll be producing close to 300,000 cars. Clearly, Latin America is a market where PSA wants to grow in a robust and sustainable way.
Yet the company's market share in Brazil remains a modest 5.5%. And with the country's economic boom sputtering, it will have to boost its fortunes even further if it's to remain a force in Latin America.
So better times for Peugeot's Brazilian workers there. Let's pick up on just a couple more of the day's business headlines for you now. Starting with GlaxoSmithKline, whose shares have opened up 1.5% on London markets. That's after the drug maker raised its hostile takeover offer for human genome sciences. According to Reuters, GSK is offering around $14 a share. That's $1 above its previous rejected offer that values human genome at around $2.5 billion. The two companies are collaborating on a treatment for diabetes, while GSK currently markets other drugs on behalf of human genome.
And Nokia is half the price of its flagship smartphone in the United States. The Finnish manufacturer is now selling its Lumia 900 for $49 on an AT&T contract. Nokia's share price recently hit a 16-year low after a string of disappointing results, while the launch of the Lumia was ruined by a software bug. Owen, thanks very much. It's Owen Fairclough with the business news. That's just about it from me this morning. Catherine's here very shortly after the break with the latest news. Stay with us.